Hello everybody, this is Kyrix with more of This Week in Kyrix. Today is Wednesday, July 25th, 2018. Get down, Winky. Come on, baby. Get down, girl. So, let's jump right into this. Let's go to Pokemon, because I want to tell this story while I'm thinking of it. Okay, one of the girls at Pokemon, one of my main rivals, one of the few people who can consistently keep up with me, she owns Ultra, I want to say it's Ultra Moon. The exact flavor of the game doesn't matter, but she owns Alola 1 and Alola 2. Let's go with that, yeah? And of course, in Ultra, there are certain Pokemon that you can only play in Ultra. Like if I want to use the new Lycanroc, if I want to use Blacephalon or Stakataka, if I want to use Naganadel or Poipole, or I want to use a specific ability, Rockruff, you have to be playing Ultra as well, or I can't use it. And she, for whatever reason that none of us can make heads or tails of, she refuses to move stuff to Ultra. Like, she did it once and then put everything back, and we're like, why? Why would you do that? There's literally nothing on Original that you don't have also on Ultra, except like, oh, you've got your TMs there, well, trade it over, Trade it over, teach the TM, and then trade it back, Oh, I've got the items. Well, put the item on it and trade it over. She has two brothers, and there's at least 3DSs in that house. She can do that shit at home. It's not like me, where I have to call up Anubis, or the tournament driver, or anyone else, and go out of my way to find someone to do this with. But, she just kind of stubbornly holds on to that. And that legitimately cost her a match today. And it's funny as shit, because we were doing Little Cup, which is just... We don't do the Smogon version of Little Cup, because fuck Smogon. And really, the Smogon version of Little Cup is next to impossible to do properly off of Pokemon Showdown. Because it involves, oh, your Pokemon has to be level 5, Which, there are certain moves you can't learn at level 5, but you can use in Little Cup. And our rules for our Little Cup, which we use just at the shorthand, but our Little Cup rules are only Pokemon that are babies, or Pikachu, well, not Pikachu specifically, only Pokemon that are babies, or are part of an evolution chain when they were introduced. For example, Magmar and Electabuzz are not eligible because Magmortar and Electivire did not exist when they were introduced, even though they exist now. Marill and Pikachu are still legal because they were the bottom tier of their evolution before the baby forms were introduced, And I allow Pika clones because during one tournament, I fucked up and told someone they could use, I think it was Togedemaru, or no, it was Dedenne. I told them they could use Dedenne, and he'd already made his team and was in a match before we caught on to the fact that I fucked up. So I'm like, you know what, screw it, Pika clones are legal. So anyway, we do this as a filler tournament for between our actual tournaments, so people have time to raise their teams, right? Because I try and schedule them for like 2 or 3 weeks apart so that people, including myself, have time to put together a whole new team. Because it's not like, oh, I'm going to find out that we're going to be playing with only dragon types that don't have wings, right? And you're going to have that team put together next week. The whole team. I mean, I can do it. I've done it before. But it's not something the average person does. And it's not something the average person should be expected to do. So, there's generally 2 weeks. Technically, it's 3 weeks a lot of times, because what'll happen is we'll make the announcement at the end of the last tournament, right? Then we'll have Little Cup the following week, and then 2 weeks after Little Cup, we'll have the tournament, or was it 1 week? Either way, there is a time gap between the tournament and Little Cup breaks it up, so that we still have a reason to aggressively battle other players, to get points, you know, other than just to get points. And also, so that we don't necessarily have to, you know, just breed like crazy, because Little Cup is as simple as, I said this today, actually. Someone's like, I don't have a Little Cup team. Well, a Little Cup team is give me 5 minutes to roam around melee and throw Pokeballs to catch my team. You know, it's literally whatever you throw together can be your Little Cup team. It won't be good, but you'll have one. You know, and you can work on it because we consistently do Little Cup. So it's worth your while to get on that and make it official Little Cup team. You know. So anyway, we're doing Little Cup, and my team is full of new Pokemon. 1 second. There are 3 Pokemon on my team, which consists of 7 Pokemon. I'll get into that in a minute. But there are 3 Pokemon on my team that are, you know, mainstays. I've got Numskull, my little Cubone. I've got Evergreen, my Pineco, because my little Rocky, the Dwebble, isn't up to par yet, and that was my first choice. And what the fuck was the third one? I can't remember his name, but he's my Helioptile. He's just a cute little thing. His name might be Ray, actually. I think it might. No, Ray is the solar power one. Either way, he's that's my team of Pokemon I use frequently. And I recently had 3 new Pokemon. One is a Goomy. I called her Blobette. She's my little booger. And she was actually finished, I want to say 3 weeks ago. But she hasn't ever seen combat yet. You know, it's just me. I decided I needed the whole Goomy line. So I have Goomy, Sliggoo, and Goodra at level 100. Because why the hell not? And recently, I decided I wanted a Huntail. So I made a Huntail. Oh, fuck. I'll get into that story in a minute. But I also decided that I needed a... I needed the Talonflame line, so I had a... What was it? A Fletchling, a Fletchinder, and a Talonflame that are all level 100 as of literally Monday morning. You know, I busted my ass and got them all maxed out, like, the day before Pokemon. And I had my Gourgeist forever, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to breed her and get a Pumpkaboo. And I did, and that was my final Pokemon. And in case you're wondering what the 7th Pokemon is, the 7th Pokemon is a Rockruff with Own Tempo, which is a Ultra exclusive. You cannot use it outside of the Ultra games. And it's my Thrash Rockruff, because it knows Thrash, which is a normal-type move that hits really hard, takes several turns to play out, and confuses the user at the end. Well, Own Tempo prevents confusion from happening at all, which allows me to use this really powerful move with 0 drawbacks. And it is actually a very powerful move, and a very powerful build that I'm rather proud of. And most people see that thing and they're like, oh, you're a jerk. You know. But, the Thrash Rockruff is in my Ultra team, so it was registered as Team 2 for anyone I played who had Ultra. And my Team 1 team is specifically for her, because she's the one who does it. I mean, there are a couple kids there that don't have Ultra, but she's the only one that has Ultra and doesn't have her Pokemon on it. There was actually another girl who did that, and she's kind of paying for it now because her game got corrupted and all her Pokemon were lost. Which sucks, you know. But anyway, she accidentally threw out the wrong Pokemon first. Her Pokemon was a Tyrunt. And I'm very familiar with this Tyrunt. This Tyrunt cost me a tournament once. Basically, she used Dragon Dance to get its stats really high, to the point where I couldn't outrun it. And if it hit me, and it would one-shot pretty much anything. And she killed me by taking out my team powerhouse with 2 crits in a fucking row, which just ignored all my stat buffs. So I knew full well, because I'd thrown out Evergreen to trap the field, so that I would have an early advantage. And I knew that if I gave her more than a turn to set this fucker up, I'm done. There was exactly one Pokemon in my entire team that could hurt this thing, and that was Numskull, the Cubone. And I sent little Nummy out, and of course she predictably did a Dragon Dance and buffed her stats. So my next turn was for Numskull to hit with Boomerang, which is a double hitting move. I actually had another ground move called Stomping Tantrum that's more accurate, but I went with Boomerang, even though it's less accurate, and that paid off. Anyway, her Tyrant hit first with Ice Fang, which is super effective, and it damn near one-shotted little Nummy. But Numskull is a defensive brick, and she has a lot of hit points to keep her safe. And the flip side to this is that is that Nummy then connected with Boomerang, which it hit first, and it triggered her Sturdy. It took her down to 1 hit point, and then it hit the second time and killed it. And then I proceeded, very slowly, she did a lot of damage, but I proceeded to wipe out the rest of her team. You know, Nummy went down on the next turn, because Nummy was slow as shit, and she was hanging on by a thread as it was. So Nummy had no chance of getting out of that in one piece. You know, it just wasn't going to happen. But, oops, wait, what? Oh. So, I tell her at the end, I'm like, you realize that the only reason you lost that fight is because you didn't switch to Ultra Moon, right? She's like, yeah, probably. I'm like, no, not probably, definitely. Because the only answer I had for that Tyrant was Numskull. I could have literally started the game, if she had told me that Tyrant was there, I could have started with any other Pokemon on my team out first, and I would have lost. Because nothing on my team could have taken that thing out before it turned my whole team into pudding. Nummy was my sole chance of winning that match. And Nummy, it turns out Numskull was the Pokemon I swapped out on Ultra to put, what's it called, to put the Rockruff in. So if she'd played Ultra, I would have had the Rockruff, and Tyrant would have killed it. Just period. Tyrant would have killed my Rockruff. So, let that be a lesson to you, kids. If you have the second version of a Pokemon game in the same region, and the first version, put all your shit on the second version, because you never know when someone's got 2 teams and you can beat the second one. But, now, this actually depends on how we... Oh, Jesus Christ. On how exactly we gun this, as it were. Because... allegedly... Well, not really allegedly. We made a slight mix-up and thought that this was the last week of the month. But it turns out next week is, in fact, the last week of the month. Oh, sandstone. That'll do it. So, even though I didn't finish this month's chart, I did get closer to it than anyone else. And that could change, because, again, we're not quite at the end of the month yet. But, because of that, I basically got the month's cards. Although, if we decide to keep the thing up next week, I'll still get the next month's cards, because I only had to win 2 more matches. But next month, or next month, next week we have an Alola brand tournament, which one of the girls set up, where basically only Pokemon from the Alola region. Jabaga! It's making me so nervous! So why am I here? 'Cause I'm an idiot, that's why. I'm gonna do it. Actually, I'm gonna do it this way. That'll work too, actually. Alright, get me down. Woohoo! Loving it! I am the clever. Okay, that is one of those new types of rock. Yeah, no? Nope, that's a new type of rock. Yep. Hate this shit. You know what, while I'm here, I don't need this. What else don't I need? Anything? Don't really need this anymore either. So yeah, let's get the rest of this sand while I'm here. Yeah. So yeah, that's I'm prepping for that. I'm training up Steenie and Bounce Sweet just for shits and giggles, just because I want them, and the Alolan Sandshrew and Sandslash because why not? You know, they're sitting in my box. I need to do something with them. Just kind of taking up space otherwise. Might do Beartic also, because I have it out because I needed to breed a move for Sandshrew and Sandslash. Icicle Crash, in case you're curious. So I might do that too while I'm here, as it were. And Gorobus and Clamperl. They're not for the Alola tournament, they're just to have. Okay, let's talk Huntail. Because I mentioned that was one of the new Pokemon that I now have, and it's true. I have a Huntail now. And he is fucking awesome, or rather she. There's a little confusion with her name. Her name is Meridia. And they're like, why Meridia? I'm like, I think I should know that name. I'm like, okay, here's the mindset behind this. Huntail. Hunter. Right? I'm thinking it's a female, so female hunter, bounty hunter, Samus. No, that's stupid. How about Meridia? Because it's a water-type Pokemon, and Meridia was the water world on Zebus. You know? Ooh, saved by the waterfall. But yeah, that was the mindset behind Meridia's name. Okay, perfect. Anyway, Meridia was taught Shell Smash, which is a move that its one form, its original form, Clamperl, can learn, but only if it stays a Clamperl until level 50. And I never really realized this until I decided to train one. Clamperl is kind of a garbage Pokemon. It knows exactly one move, ever. It only ever learns a move. Oh dear. I have erred in a big way. So let's toss this away. And let's get this back out. But, yeah. Clamperl only ever learns this one move, ever. And it learns it at level 50, halfway through its leveling lifespan. Now, it's not a big deal. Clamperl actually is a trade evolved Pokemon. So you can get this thing to level 100 and it'll be fine, and then you can use Heart Scales to learn any moves it missed in its new form. You know? But Clamperl, without involving TMs or move tutors or egg moves, only learns 5 moves. The 4 that it starts with and Shell Smash. And Shell Smash decreases both defenses by 1 stage and increases speed in both offenses by 2 stages, which is fucking broken. And I established this earlier with Huntail because the guy I was fighting, I forget what he did. He sent something out. And it hit Huntail and took me down to, let's just say For the sake of argument, let's say 15 hit points. It doesn't matter. It hurt a lot. You know, basically, one more hit and she's dead. So Meridia's is bleeding out of her ass right now. But I shell smashed, and I was already faster than him before the shell smash. So now, I'm absolutely going to nuke. And that's what it was. It was Altaria. He did something with Mega Altaria. I went first and shell smashed, and then he hit me. So he had the benefit of hitting my weakened defense, and he critted me, which hurt even more. For obvious reasons. But, anyway, Meridia took it like a champ. She absolutely gave no shits. You know. And then she proceeded to single-handedly sweep his entire fucking team. It took Zygarde to take her down because Zygarde knew extreme speed and thus went first and hit for those last 20 or so hit points that she had. And then it took me a little bit, but I managed to take out Zygarde as well. But yeah, long story short, Huntail is fucking awesome, and I really don't know why no one uses it. I mean, there are Pokemon that do what it does slightly better, but that doesn't mean there's a reason not to use it. It's not a bad Pokemon. Okay, let's see. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I hate Smogon so much, is Smogon does that stupid fucking tier system. And I think tier systems are just the worst thing you can do in any kind of actual competitive environment. Because to institute a tier system is to automatically make an excuse. When you do tiers right away, you are establishing right off the bat that, well, if I lose, it's only because you used a different tier than me. No, I'm sorry, I don't fucking fly that kite. No idea what that means. But no, I don't play that way. I don't. If I lose, it's because I need to get better at the game. You know? Because every Pokemon, there is no one-hit kill Pokemon. The girl who is my consistent rival in that game has an Arceus, which is, stat-wise, the most powerful Pokemon in the game next to Mega Rayquaza. It's got, I believe, 120 base of every stat. It is not to be fucked with. It is a dangerous, powerful beast. But it's far from unbeatable. You know? My Silvally is the next best thing, functionally, to Arceus, and I never use the damn thing, because it's really not that good. My favorite box legendary, Yveltal, is really powerful. But it's far from unbeatable, and there's some Pokemon that will just fucking wall me to death. Starlet, my signature Pokemon, can be walled by Lunala. I mean, sometimes I win the fight, but not very often. You know? And that's the thing with Pokemon is literally built on the concept of rock, paper, scissors. Where something is always stronger than something else. And some people are like, oh, don't use legendaries. I'm like, why? Let them use legendaries. I'm one of those people who, when I go on the battle spot or whatever, and I see some kid with 6 legendaries, I think, oh god, I'm winning this match so easy. And people think I'm joking. They're like, yeah, good sarcasm. It's not sarcasm. It's, I'm going to win. Because nobody, with very rare exceptions, unless there's a specific tournament built around it, nobody just uses 6 legendaries outside of a shits and giggles match. Because they're really not that good, usually. Because a lot of the people who are... The people who are good enough to use 6 legendaries just don't. Because the people who are good enough to use 6 legendaries have Pokemon that will do the job a lot better without alerting you as to what's up. You know? And when I see 6 legendaries hit the field, I generally know this is a rookie player. 9 times out of 10, this player has no idea how to use these legendaries, and they're not properly raised. You know, they're not to the right nature. They don't have IVs in the right spot. They don't have a good move pool, that kind of shit. Because, generally speaking, the people who use all legendaries aren't the kind of people who devote a lot of time to making a good team. You know, that's just been my experience. And it's not always true. I mean, I've used teams of 6 legendaries or 6 mythicals. But on average, that's kind of how that works. And if someone beats me with a team of 6 legendaries, that's my fault for missing the pattern. You know? Or sometimes someone will whoop my ass, and I don't say, oh, it's because you used this Pokemon. I say, oh, it's my fault. This team doesn't have good synergy. You know, I just threw together a lot of Pokemon that I liked without regards to how they would work together. I'm at least honest enough to recognize my fuck-ups and not blame yours. I don't blame my loss on you, with very rare exceptions. There was one case where someone beat me, and keep in mind, I did not delegitimize his win. It's one of the few wins he ever had against me. And I told him, you won, but here's why you won. I'm not saying, oh, you didn't beat me, or you only beat me because of this. I'm saying, here's why. What happened was, he played a team of steel types, and my team was very heavy in fairy types, which can't do shit to steel types, on average. And that's not even it. I am very weak against steel types, period. Very few of my favorite Pokemon are very good against them. You know? Because steel types, on average, have some of the highest defenses in the game, so even when you hit them with super effective moves, you're not doing the kind of damage you need to. And my preferred Pokemon are the kind that do physical damage and not special damage. So I'm already at a handicap going into that fight. And then on top of that, 4 out of my Pokemon had some version of fairy typing in them. And it was just my ass from the word go. And like I said, I'm not doing this to invalidate your win. I'm just saying, here's where I fucked up. You know? Because if you can't spot your own fuck-ups, you're never going to get better. You know? You have to know where you made a mistake, and you have to be able to recognize that you made a mistake. You know? But anyway, that's how today went. Yesterday was an adventure. I decided to get up early to finally do something I've been putting off for a while, which was go to Social Security and try and get some information. Now, I'll cut that story short to say they did not have the information I needed. It just wasn't a thing. So, that was time wasted. I basically got up there at about 8:15. They let us in around 8:35 or so. I was out of there at 9:04. They started calling numbers at 9. So, that was a quick ordeal is what that was. But yeah. So, long story short, that wasn't a thing. The plan had been that I had an extra bus pass from the start of the month that I haven't used and didn't really need to use. And there were the Target things where you could get, you know, Tornadus and Thundurus from Target. Plus, there were GameStop things still from last month. So I decided I was going to hop on my bus, take that paperwork up to my aunt in Largo, and hit a whole bunch of Targets and GameStops along the way. And I hit almost all the ones I planned for. I just kind of wanted to get home at some point. And when the bus dropped me at where the other Target was, the bus home, which is where I was on the way, I basically told myself if the bus is there, then I'll just get on it. If not, I'll go to Target first. But the bus was right there. So I got on it rather than potentially wait another half an hour. But the paperwork wasn't there, so I was going to tell my aunt, I mean, I can still come up there. And she's like, well, I've still got this paperwork for you to sign. And turns out she lost it, so she didn't have it for me to sign. But I got up there anyway. I got some food out of it, and $3 rather. And I got out. I got some Pokemon download cards for the crew today, which was fun. You know. I managed to get all that done. That was good. I've been playing the game Vampire on my spare time for the past couple days. Probably not tonight because the roommate's passed out on the couch, so when he finally gets up, I might go out there and play for a bit. He might be up now for all I know. It's 2:45, maybe not. But it's a lot of fun. But here's the problem with that game. The combat is fucking stupid. Not the battling itself. That's fine. What's not fine is the autosave feature. Okay, here's how this works. I get into a battle, right? There are, let's say, 3 vampire hunters there. And I go through a couple fights with them, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting my ass whooped, so I'm going to use my healing items and stuff. So I use this vial to increase my blood meter, which allows me to use special moves. And then I get my ass kicked. So I basically reload to right before the fight. But my blood vial's still gone, because I used it. Well, now I'm down a blood vial, and I couldn't beat him before. Or I decide, this happened to me, by the way, this is an exact scenario. I fought a boss, and he was whooping my ass. So I finally, for the first time in the game, pull out my revolver and start shooting the bastard. And I had been stockpiling ammo since the game started, which admittedly wasn't that far ago, because I was still early in the game. And used all my ammo on this guy. And then I died, and my ammo's still gone. I'm sorry, that's not a good system. If you're going to put an auto-saving system in so that I cannot save scum, you cannot take items that I didn't actually use. You know? Like, if I fail and you're going to auto-load me to where I failed, you don't get to take the shit that I lost and regenerate the enemies. Because that's the thing. I would kill like 3 or 4 enemies, and the last one would get me, and then I would restart the battle without my items, but all the enemies were back and at full health. And the only reason I didn't just scream is because it was 4 o'clock in the morning and I didn't want to wake up the roommate. You know? But that is bullshit of a caliber rarely seen. And there is nothing fair about that. It's utter, indescribable bullshit. And quite frankly, that shit needs to be patched. Because that is game-breaking bullshit in my view. This isn't fucking Dark Souls, which is designed to be stupid hard at all times. You know, this is a fucking RPG thing. And I understand hard, because the game says, hey, if you don't kill a lot of people, the game's going to be hard. I accept that. But I also expect it to be fair. And that's not fair. You know? And also, there's really not much point in leveling up. Because I'll be leveled... Because basically what happens is every time you increase a stat, or a skill, rather, like add a new skill, like, oh, I'm going to increase my claw skill to 3. Well, when I get that extra claw point, that raises my level, you know? So I'll be like level... let's say level 6, and then I'll run into a bunch of level 10 enemies. And then overnight, I'll rest up, and I'm like, okay, now I'm level 12. Okay, these enemies are now level 16. What the fuck, dude? Let me pass them. Let me have that feeling of, oh, look at how powerful I am for, like, a day. And then they compensate with my new strength. You know, like, oh, we better get closer to his level. But it's kind of bullshit that every enemy you always fight is always going to be stronger than you. And I don't know. I'm sorry. That was dumb when Final Fantasy VIII did, and it's dumb now. But it is a fun game. I mean, the gameplay itself's kind of wonky. It's not unplayably so, but it's kind of borked. But the story is fun. The idea behind it is a lot of fun. Okay. But yeah, I basically spent all of Monday on the bus, and I was expecting to be home at like 6. I got home at like 3. You know, partly because I got out there so early and I got everything accomplished so quickly. But it was still enjoyable. I spent most of it listening to Aftermath from the Star Wars book thingy, and it's a lot of fun so far. I'm enjoying it. But I've been getting into 2 separate arguments on YouTube for the past couple days, and they're both starting to piss me off. And one is I'm getting in an argument with someone over evolution and how it works, because they clearly do not know what the fuck they're talking about. And I keep telling them, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, because they'll try and say, oh, here's this thing, and then link me to a science magazine. I'm like, dude, science magazines are not journals. They're magazines. It's fucking entertainment. That's some guy at a desk fucking printing what he read somewhere or what he got in an interview. That person is not necessarily knowledgeable on the subject. And then he'll do a YouTube video. I'm like, dude, I make YouTube videos. YouTube videos don't mean shit. Unless it's peer-reviewed. And like, well, peer review is just... you know, something, I forget what they said, but I'm like, no, that's kind of how science works, is you give me a paper that other scientists have looked over and torn the shit out of, trying to discredit, and then it came through unscathed, that's the paper I'll read. But the guy doesn't know what he's fucking talking about, because he keeps trying to say, well, human evolution's bullshit because Neanderthals aren't related to us. I'm like, that's right. They're not. They're not part of our lineage. They're part of the tree, but not part of our lineage. They are an offshoot. You know? And it's like, well, 8 men, or these things, something about like 8 men didn't exist. I'm like, that's right. 8 men don't exist. Just like you can't go to the animal shelter and get canine dogs and feline cats. You know? Humans are 8s. That is how we are biologically classified. You know, whether or not you agree with the concept of evolution, humans are fucking primates, specifically in the 8 family part of the family tree. That's where we fit on the biological classification line. You know? I mean, for example, if you're in Mississippi, you can agree or disagree with the idea that Mississippi's in the United States and not the Confederacy, but it doesn't change the fact that you live in fucking Mississippi now, does it? Whether I agree with which country it's in or not, you're still in Mississippi in that case. But, yeah, the guy, I'm like, dude, you don't... The argument you're making isn't the argument we're having. And then we mentioned something about fixed genes. And I told him that the concept that genes need to be fixed pretty much declares that evolution is a thing. He's like, well, evolution doesn't fix genes. I'm like, okay, first off, we're using a different definition of the word fix. My version of fix is as in repair, whereas his is to set, like a fixed point, as opposed to I fixed the VCR. You know? Oh, that awkward moment when you realize that some of the people on your channel might not even know what a fucking VCR is. And then I almost said DVD player, and then I realized they might not know that either. Because nowadays everyone has Blu-ray players. Or consoles like I have. I mean, shit, I've only ever owned one DVD player, and now I just have consoles and computers. Is this done yet? I'm not always just hopping up here to clear time. I'm also checking on the grass growth. Because it irks me. Okay. I'd say it irks me that it's been stopping like 2 spaces down, but now it's actually up here. It takes forever, man. But the other argument I have, and this one's a little more touchy, because there's only so much nuance you can convey in text. And that's the concept of representation. Where I always hear people talk about, we want representation here, and my response is, if you can only gain proper and valid representation and properly identify with people who look or act like you lack imagination and you are a bigot. And here's the explanation for that, because that comes off really bullshit if you don't listen to the context behind it. I am a big fan of Luke Cage. And the reason I paused on that was because my brain was trying to make up whether or not to call him Power Man or Luke Cage. And I'm like, why are you even calling him Power Man? He hasn't gone by that name in like 20 years. But yeah, Luke Cage. I like Luke Cage. I like Luke Cage because he avoids a lot of the bullshit of superhero politics. You know, Luke Cage doesn't get involved in a lot of the big bullshitty things. Like, he, for example, doesn't have an Armor Wars like Iron Man did. What's Armor Wars, you ask? Armor Wars is, as I understand it, because I didn't read it, basically Tony Stark got tired of all these copycats of his technology showing up. So he went on a crusade to beat up and take the armor of every armored super being in the Marvel Universe. And what finally was the last straw is he attacked S.H.I.E.L.D. to steal the Mandroid armors, only to find out they didn't incorporate any of his technology at all. And he had a lot of shit over that. Well, here's the thing with Luke Cage. He is a street-level hero. He's like Spider-Man. He is basically a black Spider-Man with slightly different powers. Well, very different powers. As far as he's invulnerable and he's not nearly that agile. As the hero figure puts it, Luke goes through, I go over. You know? But what it means is that Luke Cage doesn't have a rogues gallery of big-name supervillains that he tangles with. He'll fight supervillains, and he'll beat their asses. But he doesn't have a lot of them himself. He tends to have mildly powered people, and he has the Purple Man, which he inherited from his wife. Or at least, I think so. It might have been back when they were dating or back when they were friends, but that's mostly Jessica Drew's villain, the Purple Man. But as a result, like in Civil War, he was on the anti-registration side. And as he put it, what happened is when the day ticked off, basically when the clock struck midnight, every hero who wasn't registered became a criminal. And Luke sent his wife and newborn daughter to Canada, where the law didn't apply. And Jessica's like, why don't you come with me, Luke? And he's like, no. I'm just gonna sit here, lawfully in my house, and not do nothing. And she's like, well, let me stay here. It's like, no, because you and I both know the shit's gonna go down, and I want our daughter safe, and I want you to protect her. This is my bullshit, and I'm gonna handle it. And basically, when midnight struck, the cops came to his house, and he basically said something along the lines of, what, a man's not allowed to sit on his butt in his own home anymore? And they tried to arrest him, and Cap and his crew came in and busted him out, and that's how he joined Cap's side of the Civil War. But here's the thing. There is a lot of black in Luke Cage outside of his skin. Like, he's from Harlem. He deals with a lot of black issues, especially back in the 70s era. There are comics I've read of his where he's going back to his old neighborhood and busting up drug dealers. You know? Part of the Heroes for Hire concept was the idea of a broke black man who was doing the only thing he had to make money, and half the time he didn't even get his money. But here's the other thing about Luke Cage. He's a good guy. He is a loyal person. He is a man of very strong principles. And he is a man that once he gives his word, he will fucking keep it. And the principles thing was Dr. Doom once hired him, I forget what it was, I think he had to beat up some robots, right? And he hired him for like $100. Which to me $100 is a lot of money, but in the adult world, you know, it's not that big a deal. Or maybe it was $20. I think it was like $100. It was basically small change, you know. And Doom skipped out on his bill. He went home to Latveria. Luke went to the Fantastic Four's house, beat the shit out of Ben Grimm, and basically took a jet to fly to Latveria, where he proceeded, in the middle of a Latverian civil war, to beat up both sides, find Doc Doom, and beat the ever-loving shit out of him until Doc Doom coughed up the money. There's a joke that the 4 scariest words in the Marvel Universe are, "Where's my money, honey?" But Dr. Doom even asks, like, you came to my country, you beat up an army, you beat the shit out of me, over $100? Are you that broke? He's like, it ain't about the money, it's about the principle. You know? Here's another example of Luke Cage's principles. Civil War just ended. Well, Civil War had been over for a while, but the Superhuman Registration Act just ended. Captain America's back, he's in charge, you know, Norman Osborn's been overthrown. And Cap comes to Luke Cage, who had been leading Cap's Avengers in his absence when he had died. And he basically said, Luke, I'm proud of you. You did the whole superhero community proud. You stuck to your guns. You didn't sign the act, and yet when you were needed, you and yours still stepped up to help save the world, even though it put you in danger. I'm going to give you your own team of Avengers. You know, he's like, you're going to be free and clear. You don't owe me anything. You can have anybody in the superhero community except me, Tony, and Thor. You know, meaning Iron Man and Cap and Thor. And he put together a group of Avengers that basically amounted to Luke Cage getting his own secret club and inviting all his friends to join. It was a really motley crew of superheroes. It was Luke Cage, it was Danny Rand, it was Jessica Jones, Spider-Man was in it, Daredevil joined, and so did Doc Strange later. Ben Grimm was in it, Logan was in it, Squirrel Girl was in it as a babysitter. I want to say there was one more, but I don't remember who. It might have been Echo. No, Echo was the original team, never mind. But yeah, he had a lot of people on there, and Victoria Hand, who had been Norman Osborn's second-in-command, basically, Steve hired her on to be the liaison. And Luke wasn't happy about that, but he let her in, basically saying, you step out of line, I'm going to put your ass in the dirt. And she's like, I wouldn't expect anything less. And she showed up one morning while they're all having breakfast and started laying checks on the table. And Luke was not having that. Because in his mind, if he's being paid, that means that Steve Rogers, Captain America, you know, at this point, the head of the superhero community, had some say in what he did, and he was promised that wouldn't happen. So he flat out said, I ain't taking this money, none of us taking this money, etc. And then he was all set to basically have none of the Avengers take the money. And Jessica verbally slapped the shit out of him. She tried to take him out of the room to have the fight. And he's like, there ain't nothing you can say to me, woman, that you can't say to me in front of all the others. And she basically tore him a new ass. At which point he's like, is it too late to go in the other room? But what she basically told him is, Luke Cage, first off, you have a daughter to support. You ain't turning down money. And secondly, who the fuck are you to tell these people what they can and can't take? Like Spider-Man specifically is known to be dirt poor, and he was part of the team. Ironically, he couldn't take the check anyway because he'd have to register his identity for the bank. You know, and he was not about to do that for Victoria Hand because she used to work for Osborn, and Petey and Osborn kind of have this thing. He kind of murdered her girlfriend. He's kind of Peter Parker's Joker. He really kind of is. But yeah, I identify with Luke Cage. I like to think that I can be a principled, loyal person who can always be counted on in a pinch. And it has nothing to do with being black. And I understand that if you're black, there's more that you can get from him that I don't. Like the whole black culture, the whole black upbringing kind of thing. But to say that just because you're black, you have to identify with Luke Cage as racist. To say that you identify with him solely because he's black is fucking racist. It ignores everything about that character. Likewise, I don't identify with Captain America because he's white. I identify with Cap because he is literally the heart of the Marvel Universe. I used to think Cap was a stupid hero. I'm like, oh, he's a guy who throws a shield. What's so special about that, you know? And then I started reading the What If books of Marvel, where it's like, what if this one thing changed? And I quickly came to the conclusion that Cap and Spider-Man hold the Marvel Universe together. when something happens to either one of them, the whole thing goes upside down on its ass. It's just a fact. Read What If. It's just how that works. And again, beyond that, he is the moral pillar of the Marvel Universe. He is the good guy. He is the good guy by which all other good guys are measured. And quite frankly, I would love to aspire to be that person. And I think most people would. For example, Tony Stark is a nerd. He's white. And I don't identify with him all. He's kind of an asshole. He is the cause of a lot of problems, you know? I don't like him. He's a lot more fun in the movies because he's not associated with all the shit that he's done in the comics. Robert Downey Jr. in a very big way saved Iron Man because he's kind of despised among comic fans for the bullshit he's pulled over the years. You know? He's not a super popular character like you'd think he'd be. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's gotten better over the years, but he's kind of has the reputation that Hank Pym has had. You know what I mean? He's not super well liked. And my problem with that is, if you can get something extra from that character, that's fine. But I don't like the idea that you can only identify with characters that are like you. The fact that a black person cannot identify with Captain America, cannot identify with Tony Stark or Thor, cannot identify with Wolverine, etc. You know? It's just, it's ludicrous to me. It is utterly ludicrous to say that. And it is just so bigoted. And it's passed off like it's normal. Like it's just, oh, of course this is how it is. How could a black person possibly identify with this white character? That just doesn't sit well with me as a person. And they were saying, well, if you're threatened by this and you feel assaulted, I'm like, I don't feel assaulted as a white person. This has nothing to do with being white. It's not that I'm assaulted as a white person. I'm insulted on behalf of these characters. The fact that they have all of this rich history going on and all these great character traits, and you reduce them to, he black. You know? And yes, I realize that was a very racist thing, the way I said that, and I do apologize for that. Because that was stereotyped and fucked up. But the idea that you like the character because they're black and nothing else. You know? I compared it to, part of the problem with Wakanda, or not Wakanda, but Black Panther, was the whole Wakanda Forever crowd who kept talking about how awesome Wakanda was, like it was some kind of African promised land. When I finally saw the movie, I realized they did say this, which makes me think a lot of these people didn't actually watch the movie. Wakandans don't give a shit about people who aren't from Wakanda. That was actually a major plot point that I found out later. Because a lot of people, and I'm not putting these words in their mouth, they've flat out said that they like the idea of this because it's basically a country that doesn't let white people in. I'm like, they don't let black people in either. They don't let anyone in. You know? That's kind of Wakanda's thing. It's kind of known for that. And the funny thing is, Wakanda is the African version of what popular culture sees Donald Trump America as be, you know? And most of the Wakanda Forever crowd are the people who abhor Donald Trump's America. Now, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that that's what Donald Trump's America is like. I'm saying that's how it's seen, you know? It's seen as, oh, this is a racist, whites-only state kind of thing. Whether it is or not, I'll leave that up to you. But I'm not a fan of that myself. See, here's the thing. I think any form of supremacy or ethno-state is bad by default. I don't want white supremacy, and I don't want black supremacy. I don't want male supremacy or female supremacy. I don't want straight supremacy or gay supremacy. I just want everyone to be able to get along. It's kind of like when everyone was arguing about the whole transgender bathroom thing, my response is, and still is, the same, which is, am I the only person on the planet that uses the fucking stalls? Because I'll let you in a little secret. When you're in the stall and the door's shut, you don't know who the fuck's sitting next to you. You know? Unless you're really good at telling people apart by their legs. And I've got some friends with some really girly legs. You know what I'm saying? So it's just... But yeah, my whole thing on the representation thing is, if you can get something else from a character based on that, based on the fact that you're black, or you're white, or whatever, then more power to you. That's great. I'm very happy for you as a person. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should generally identify with them just because they're black. You shouldn't like Black Panther because he's black and you're black. You should like Black Panther because you like what he stands for. And if you're black and he's black, that's something extra, you know? And someone tried to call me out like, oh, you don't know what it's like to not be represented. And here's something I don't know if I've talked about, but my response is basically, bitch, I'm an atheist. How many heroic atheists can you think of? Off the top of your head. And of them, how many of them is the atheism used as a positive trait instead of just, oh, that's a negative trait? And I basically went through a list. I'm like, okay, where's my atheist superhero? There isn't one in Marvel Comics because there are gods known to exist. So if you're an atheist, then basically that means one of two things. You're either horrendously ignorant of reality, because there are literal gods walking among them, or you're not an atheist, you're a theist who is a non-worshipping believer. Like, why did I say Donald Trump? Tony Stark does not believe in Thor. He's not a worshipper of Thor. But he works with the fucking guy. I pointed out that Captain America has served alongside 2 gods in the Avengers, and Tony served along 3. And I probably missed a couple, but Cap has served alongside of Thor and Hercules, and Tony served along both of them and Ares. So, and in DC, Wonder Woman's a goddess, and if she's not, she hangs out with them. Zuriel, who was an angel of God, was a member of the Justice League. In the Justice Society, Spectre was a member, who is the literal manifestation of God's vengeance. Darkseid is a fucking god. Alright, what about Dark Horse? Hellboy. Where do you think he's from? What about Image? Spawn. Enough said. You know, there's no atheist superhero in comics. Hell, even if you go into Gold Digger, Venus has shown up around issue 200 or so. Or maybe it was like 150. You know, as in the Greek god Venus. Granted, she's depowered and kind of bound to a helmet at this point. But she's still a fucking goddess. You know? And generally, when you see someone in movies, if they're an atheist, it's glossed over or it's made, you know, a negative trait. Like, oh, he's good. If only he weren't this asshole atheist, you know? And don't even get me started on what atheists look like in Christian movies, like God Is Not Dead. Which, by the way, contains no atheists. What you have in God's Not Dead is a misotheist, which is a theist who hates God. You know? And I'm like, bitch, don't talk to me about not understanding. Just because I'm a straight white male doesn't mean that I'm not also part of a marginalized group. Because there are marginalized groups that have nothing to do with race, gender, or sexuality. And then they were talking about, like, the LGBT crowd, and I'm like, okay, I got news for you. That same crowd that wants you stoned to death or thrown off a tallest building because you're gay or identify as a different gender would just as happily do the same thing to me for not believing in their God. Or any God, rather. You know? We actually have the same people who hate us. You know? And I pointed out, here's the thing. I have one of them died heart attack, by the way, not murder or anything. I had 2 gay cousins and 2 bisexual nieces, and those are just the ones I know of off the top of my head. I don't connect with my family that often. But no one gives them shit about either of those things. No one ever had, either. When we heard the cousin was gay, we're like, oh, really? Oh, okay. That was the response that pretty much everyone had, including the handful of religious members of my family. Now, the bisexual nieces no one likes, but that's because they're kind of bad people. Has nothing to do with being bisexual or gay or whatever. It's just they do a lot of bad shit. But I can't think of really anyone in my family that I've outed myself to as an atheist. I almost never mention it on my channel, because I don't want to start the fucking flame wars that'll come out of that, because a lot of people just assume, by default, that if you're an atheist, you're a bad person. You know? And it's only in the past 10 or so years that a lot of people are even getting the courage to come out and say that they're atheists. So, I know what it's like to be in a marginalized group. I don't have any politicians fucking vouching for me. You have gay senators, congressmen, mayors, whatever. How many atheists you got? Not a lot. There are some. But not a lot. And their shot at the presidency is almost non-existent. You know? So. But yeah, that's my problem. I don't have a problem with the concept of being represented and getting something out of it. But the idea of just having representation for the sake of representation is stupid, because it implies that you're racist, or sexist, or in some other way bigoted, because you cannot put yourself in a situation where you can see someone who looks different than you, or acts different than you, or thinks different than you, and see them as a good person. Remember how I said Captain America is one of my favorite superheroes? Cap's a Christian. At no point has that ever been a problem for me. Not once. You know who my favorite Fantastic Four member is? Ben Grimm. The only character in that whole team that I give a shit about. Jewish. That's firmly established in comics that he is Jewish. As in, like, religiously, not culturally Jewish. There was a book called Infinity Crusade where you basically had all of the religious superheroes come under the control of a villainess called the Goddess. Nightcrawler, one of my favorite X-Men of all time. Super Catholic. Super religiously Catholic. Like, in several adaptations, he's been a fucking monk Catholic. You know? Hasn't bothered me in the slightest. Doesn't make me love the character any less. You know? Kitty Pryde, one of my favorite female X-Men. Also Jewish, and not just culturally. Matter of fact, that actually came up in X-Men Evolution during the Christmas episode. You saw something along the lines of where it was brought up that she was celebrating Hanukkah with her family. You know? All this shit doesn't bother me. Because I can look past those surface traits and look at what the actual character is. You know? But it just drives me nuts that people go for the surface level. If you like Black Panther, if you're black and you like Black Panther and you like all the things about him, you like that he's a principled man, you like that he is a loyal friend, you like that he is a powerful, badass fighter, and on top of that, the fact that he's black is the icing on the cake, then goddammit, you eat that cake and you love every fucking crumb of it. But if your whole thing starts and ends with he's black, you're doing that for the wrong reason. You know? And that's the problem, is a lot of the crowd, the representation crowd, honestly thinks, because they think this way, that we're mad, like, oh, you removed all the straight white males, we have no one to identify with. No, that has nothing to do with it. The problem was, not that you removed the straight white males, it's the fact that you replaced them with characters who are their representation. And I used an example of this, which comic fans will know, is called America Chavez. And I think I've discussed her on here. If not, it's easy to find. articles and shit on her and videos on YouTube. But basically, and I haven't read the comic she's in. I've seen summaries, and when I say summaries, I mean had the comics read to me kind of thing, like page by page reviews. Skipping a page or two here for copyright reasons, but getting the gist of the comic. I have never read the comic she's in as a group, but I've seen her solo series. And allegedly, in the comic she's in with groups, she's a great character. She's a strong character, a good leader. She has friendships. You know, she has all this nuance to her. But in her comic, she's a lesbian. And I don't mean, oh, they made her a lesbian. She was always a lesbian. But that's her character. She is a lesbian. You know, and she seems to have this magical power to make every other girl into girls. Like, there was a scene where Hawkeye, that is to say, Hawkeye number 2, Kate Bishop, is seeing her with her new girlfriend and thinking, oh, isn't it wonderful when women can be attracted to women or something? You know, instead of just, isn't it great when two people are in love? But that was the whole thing she was reduced to, is she is a lesbian. Specifically, she is an angry lesbian masquerading as a Latina who likes to hit people when she gets mad. And she gets mad often. And that was what her character was reduced to. And she could have been a lot more. You know? But they specifically decided to hire a writer to write her, who was also gay and Latina, because that's the only way you can properly write her, but apparently not, because she was written better to the point where even people who like her, who liked her character back in the days, can't stand her solo series. Because the things they loved about the character are gone, replaced with, hey, did you remember that I'm gay? Hey, do you remember that I'm a Latina? You know? I mean, for the first 3 or so issues, like every other page was some mention of the fact that she was a lesbian. Do you know how many times it comes up in the Avengers vs. X-Men comics that Northstar's gay? Because he is. Hard-pressed to find it, though. Do you know how often in the comics it comes up that Mystique's bisexual? Because she is. Doesn't come up, though. Here's a fun one. Did you realize that pretty much for the entirety of her character, Wonder Woman was bisexual? Because she was. She comes from an island full of women who form long-lasting, loving relationships. It actually came up in a comic that I read. It wasn't a Steve Tremor. She had a new guy. I think he was going by Nemesis. He had a real name, but I forget what it was. But basically, he'd been courting Wonder Woman for a while, and she took him to Themyscira and had him dip his hand in the water, because apparently Themyscira has megalodons patrolling it. And the idea was so they would get his scent and recognize him as an ally, so he could come and go from Themyscira without getting eaten. And she happened to mention and propositioned him in basically an Amazonian marriage ritual. She basically courted him and explained the whole courtship ritual and the fact that basically on Themyscira the two of them were legally a couple or married or whatever. And towards the end of the comic, he's like, wait a second, there aren't any men on Themyscira. She's like, yeah, that's right. It's like, well, then who did they... And she just kind of looks at him and winks. It's not even brought up the fact that Themyscira is an island full of lesbians. Or at the very least, bisexuals. It's never spelled out, but you can get it. Wonder Woman herself has never really had a problem with women or men. But it's not shoved down your throat, because it doesn't matter for most of the stories. You know, I read, what was it? Well, let's get a good example here. See, that's the problem. I'm trying to think of an example where someone who's not part of a couple. Because that's the problem, is a lot of the comic characters are paired off. But I'm trying to think of a single comic book character whose sexual preference is rammed down our throat. And it's really not anything snapping to mind, you know? I mean, the most you'll get is from like the 60s or 70s, where Iceman and Beast in the X Factor will see a girl like, wow, she's really hot, you know? And that's generally as far as it goes. I mean, I don't have a problem with lesbian characters. I don't have a problem with fucking transgender characters. The Runaways, one of my favorite comics, had Carolina Dean. I've talked about this. She's a lesbian. And once or twice it has been a plot point that she was a lesbian. But it's generally not spoken of. Matter of fact, unless you see her with Zavin in Zavin's girl form, you'd be forgiven for thinking she was. Or for not thinking she was. Nico has tendencies towards being a lesbian. She's... what's the phrase they use? Bi-curious? Like, she's not into girls, but she really likes Carolina. To be fair, Carolina's pretty hot. But you get the idea. Anyway, I have talked for a while. I'm actually 11 minutes over time, which to an extent makes up for it. So, let me summarize. If you have Pokemon Ultra and you have Pokemon non-Ultra, switch your stuff to the Ultra. It'll win you matches. Evolution is a thing. And I don't have a problem with the idea of representation, that you can get something extra that someone else can't get out of something. Like, for example, let's say tomorrow we get an announcement of some new superhero movie in a completely separate universe. Not Marvel, not DC, not any existing thing, just a superhero, kind of like how RoboCop wasn't a comic character. But we get a new superhero, and the superhero's an atheist. You know, he's got all these great superpowers, he fights really awesome villains. Or she, I don't care. Fuck, it can be a piece of sentient sponge cake, I don't give a shit. But the character involved is an atheist. The character's awesome, the character's got a great personality, great story, you know. I'll like that character, and the fact that they're an atheist will be something extra. But I won't go to see it just because the character's an atheist. I might fucking hate the character, despite being an atheist. There are atheists I can't stand. I was about to name one, I'm like, no, I don't want to start any fucking flame wars. But there is one on YouTube, specifically, that I used to watch, and I no longer do. Because the person involved, and I won't say the gender, because I watch a lot of male and female atheists. I was going to say I also watch a transgender atheist, and I remember that person is actually a Christian. And that person just hangs out with several atheists. But this person basically is a hardcore SJW. And I just got sick of it. I got sick of voicing anything in the comments that was contrary to what they say and being just torn apart by this person for disagreeing. You know? And it got worse when I realized it was happening to other people too. But I just got tired of them debunking all these religious people for having arguments that were just foolish, and then making similar arguments in favor of other things that also had no evidence behind them, and not getting the correlation, as it were. Or here's a better one, Steve Shives. He used to be so good, and I for a long time stayed subscribed to him, hoping that he would just, you know, wake back up, and it never happened. He is a pretty toxic individual. He basically refuses to talk to anyone. Here's the thing. He called out atheists for being, you know, ridiculing religion. I'm like, dude, have you watched your own videos? That's a thing you used to do all the time. You know, that's why people subscribe to you, to watch you tear into people. But yeah, I don't mind if you get something extra because you share a trait with someone and you identify with them extra that way. But to identify with someone solely because they share your skin color, or whatever fucking sexual plumbing you have, or they like the same kinds of people you do. No. And I pointed out that if you get right down to it, There's really not any superheroes that anyone can realistically identify with. Like, oh, you identify with Iron Man because he's white. Iron Man is a billionaire with a fucking powered mech suit who, at one point, ran the country. The fuck am I supposed to identify with that? You identify with Captain America because he's white. Well, he's also a 100-year-old super soldier who once punched Hitler in the face. Kind of hard to identify with that. You know? You identify with the Hulk. No. You identify with Thor. He's a literal fucking god. You know? It's... No, you cannot... When you get right down to it, you can't really identify with someone over surface traits like that. You have to... Because it falls apart real quickly. Like, oh, I identify with Black Panther because he's black. He's also an African prince. Are you an African prince? You know? And I can definitely... The sad thing is, these people are identifying with Black Panther, but they said nothing about Blade. You know, like, oh, finally, a black superhero. What about Blade? What about Hancock? You know, they came out ages before. You know? Hell, as I understand it, because I never really paid attention at the time, Blade pretty much is the reason that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was able to be a thing. You know? Without Blade, there would have been no Black Panther. And one of the reasons I never made it a point to see Black Panther in theaters is because I've heard all the stories of people where white people were kept out of the theaters, you know? And some of them are exaggerated, but here's the thing. I live in a very black area of Florida. Like, not my particular neighborhood, but there is a high, like 50% or so population of black people to white people. It's like an even 50-50 ratio. And the closer you get to downtown, past Southside, the more it gets like that, and that's where the theater is. So it's entirely possible that I could run into people fucking picketing the lines, shoving white people out of the line. And I didn't want to deal with that shit. Am I normally scared of black people? No, not really. I'm scared of people. Here's the thing, if I'm out at night and I see a black person on the street and I see a white person on the street, I don't feel safe with either one of them. Doesn't matter if they're ignoring me or not. You know, because I know, quite frankly, most people could whoop my ass. You know, if there's a group of people, I'm nervous until I'm more than 30 feet away from them. And that's on a bike. If there's a group of people near me and I'm walking anywhere, if I can still see them, I'm still on guard. Because, quite frankly, I don't want to be the guy who drops his guard and gets his ass whooped. But seriously, I need to end this video. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to do exactly that. I love that I actually managed to get absolutely nothing accomplished this whole fucking video. Alright, everyone. Bye-bye. Wait, what the hell? Oh, I have host options. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.